A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I still remember the first time I walked into that small examination room, framed by pale yellow walls that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, with a flickering fluorescent bulb that hummed overhead like a persistent ghost trying to breach the silence. As a fresh-faced medical intern, I was filled with an overwhelming mix of eagerness and anxiety, flipping through pages of notes on patient rapport and ethics while trying to remember the dozens of diseases I'd only ever read about in textbooks. I wanted to make a difference, to heal and to help. But it was during that first week that life decided to hit me with a hard truth that I could never have prepared for. I was assigned to a pediatric ward, which was both a blessing and a challenge, teeming with stories that tugged at the heartstrings in ways I was still figuring out how to process. My very first patient was a young girl named Lily, with golden curls that framed her cherubic face and a smile bright enough to fill the room. Once a ray of sunshine, she had started to dim, battling a rare form of leukemia that had robbed her of her joy and her childhood. At just 8 years old, she was grappling with the reality of her treatment, the endless needles piercing her small arms, and the isolation that accompanied her illness. I was assigned to her care, and it felt like being handed a delicate glass sculpture. I wanted to protect her, to help in whatever way I could. Yet, the weight of her vulnerability crushed me in an unexpected way. Day by day, I observed how the sterile scent of antiseptics hung in the air, intertwined with cheerful decorations on the walls that seemed to mock the gravity of her situation. Our conversations flowed like a gentle stream, with her effortlessly transitioning from her favorite animated shows to the games she missed playing outdoors. I laughed along with her, tried to adopt her innocence and optimism, but inside, I felt an ache that gnawed at my insides. My time with her was fleeting in the grand scheme of her treatment, external to the ebb and flow of what I was learning. I had never encountered this kind of emotional terrain before. How could I balance my professional responsibilities while also forming a bond that felt so achingly human? I went home each evening wondering if I should be feeling more detached or allowing myself to care deeply for this tiny soul who was learning at such a tender age that life could sometimes be cruel. Then came the day when the doctor pulled me aside, his brow furrowed under the weight of difficult words. The treatment wasn't working. Lily had developed resistance to the chemotherapy drugs they had been using. He spoke in hushed tones, outlining potential alternatives, but each option felt like more of a gamble than a safety net. I left the huddle feeling hollow, knowing I had to face her with this unwelcome truth. That evening, as I prepared myself to sit by her side, I felt a tsunami of panic wash over me. How do you explain that the medicine meant to heal her was now failing? How can one express that kind of heartbreak without shattering the fragile spirit of a child? Sitting down next to her bed, I tried to keep my tone light, but she could see through my facade. "You look sad," she said, her innocent blue eyes searching mine for answers. I opened my mouth to reassure her, but nothing came out. Her tiny hand reached out and clasped mine, an innocent gesture that ignited something powerful within me. I finally spoke, telling her that we were in this together, that she was brave and strong, but inside, my heart felt like it was breaking. I thought about the guidelines and the ethics, the tightrope that healthcare professionals are expected to walk between their emotions and responsibilities, how HIPAA measures guard our patients' privacy but often leave us feeling emotionally isolated from one another. The words echoed in my head, they prescribed distance, but how could I maintain that with a girl who truly was just a child? In the following days, as we both faced the harsh realities ahead, she began to ask me about my life, who I was, where I came from, things I never thought I would share with a patient. I found myself divulging snippets of my own story, whether about my childhood dreams or my recent hobbies, and she would eagerly respond with tales of her favorite books. In those moments, laughter would bubble between us, momentarily dispelling the heavy veil of grief that lingered over her room. Each visit became a bittersweet fusion of joy and despair, an exchange of life even on days that felt suffocatingly bleak. Yet, the inevitable happened 4 weeks later. Lily's condition suddenly worsened, and I knew deep down that we were nearing an end. I sat beside her in silence, holding her small hand, realizing that the barrier between patient and caregiver had irrevocably torn. It was during those last moments, when she looked up at me with those trusting eyes, that everything stopped. We shared a laugh, a flicker of joy amidst the heavy heartache, and she whispered, "I'll always be your friend." Just moments later, her breaths grew shallow, the beep of machines fading into a haunting lullaby. I could only grasp her hand tighter, the tears now streaming down my face as she exhaled for the last time, her little body finally releasing the burden it had carried. It broke me. I lost a piece of myself that day. I left the hospital that evening feeling heavier than I had ever felt before. I hadn't held myself together, nor did I understand how one could maintain professionalism when one's heart was so deeply entwined in the difficult fabric of a life lost too soon. And as I sat in the back seat of the cab, staring blankly at the passing street lights, the weight of the world pressed down on me, an acute reminder of what it meant to be fragile. I realized that no amount of HIPAA training or medical knowledge could prepare me for the emotional tapestry woven between healing and loss, the deep, sometimes cruel bond we form with those we are meant to care for in this life. Now, months later, I reflect on that time with Lily with a bittersweet sense of acceptance. The journey of healing doesn't always mean mending. Sometimes, it's about learning to carry the pieces of what was lost with compassion and grace. I still work in healthcare, still hold the hands of children, and every day, I remind myself of that laughter, the light she brought into even the darkest of rooms, and I know that for every heart I may break, I also have the opportunity to build bridges of connection, however fleeting they may be. Because at the end of the day, it is the love we share, even in sadness, that truly helps us heal. As I sit here, reflecting on those poignant memories, I'm reminded of a patient who brought me an unexpected lesson in love and loss. It began quietly, like a whisper of fate, when I received the case of a young boy named Ethan, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with a spirit that shone even in the confines of the hospital. The first time I entered his room, his laughter rang out like sweet music, flowing against the stark white walls adorned with cheerful drawings that filled the space with a remarkable warmth. The joy he radiated was infectious, serving as a stark contrast to the sterile environment that usually wrapped us all in its cold embrace. I was a few years into my career, passionate yet inexperienced, still wrestling with the emotional toll of caring for those in need while protecting my heart from the inevitable heartaches that healthcare often brings. Ethan had been diagnosed with leukemia, a battle he faced with the bravery of a lion, cracking jokes about his hair loss and insisting that the doctors were merely making him a little superhero ready to save the world. His resilience and ability to find light in darkness reminded me of that precious child I lost, and each bittersweet laugh of Ethan struck a chord in me. It was a delicate dance, almost like walking the tightrope of hope and fear, both wondering if I could risk getting attached while knowing he was in a precarious place. With each passing day, I would sit by his bedside, sharing stories, jokes, and even the occasional tears. It felt like a privilege to be a part of his journey, to witness a child's will to fight, to dream, even when pain threatened to pull him under. Yet, there came a day when I walked into his room, expecting the usual banter. Instead, I was met with an unsettling silence, the kind that wraps around you like fog, heavy and suffocating. On that day, Ethan's eyes were closed, a thin sheet pulled tightly over his frail body, his mom sitting beside him, cradling his tiny hand in hers. I felt that familiar pang in my chest, the fear of the inevitable, but I steadied myself, reminding myself to stay present, to honor every moment. I whispered sweet greetings, sharing tales of the outside world, of bright sunny days just waiting for him to conquer. But it was Ethan's reply that shattered me. As he opened his eyes, that spark, a fire I thought would never dim, flickered weakly. He looked toward me, and with a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Can we still go on our adventures in my dreams? I want you to come with me." It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, ruthlessly. How could I tell a boy who had fought so valiantly that sometimes dreams are where we go to escape our realities? Instead, I smiled, and with a gentle nod, I promised him we would embark on our greatest quest yet. That night, as I lay in my own bed, wrestling with sleepless thoughts, I found myself drifting into a world of dreams. In my mind's eye, I could see Ethan and me, soaring above mountains, diving into oceans filled with sparkling fish, laughing as we sprinted through fields of swaying flowers. It was beautiful and vivid, a tapestry woven from all the joy he had shared. The following days felt like a montage, memories played in fast forward, until it was time for Ethan to say goodbye. To see his heartache mirrored in the faces of his family was solace and sorrow entwined, a bittersweet symphony I was all too familiar with. I held his hand as he took his last breaths, wishing I could take away every ounce of pain with my bare hands, pleading silently for a miracle. And when he finally drifted, his peaceful face etched in my memory, I realized this was a part of my journey, a part that I had to carry with compassion and grace. The hardest moments in our lives often shape our paths into something beautiful, something meaningful, no matter how tragic. Looking back on that chapter, I understand now that pain exists alongside joy, and healing does not equate to forgetting. I learned to wear my scars as badges that remind me of the love shared, even in fleeting moments, and how those moments can bridge what feels like an insurmountable divide. Nowadays, I pour all that I've learned into every child I encounter, sharing laughter, kindness, and a gentle presence to remind them that it's okay to be vulnerable, to embrace emotions, even the hardest ones. Because, in the end, it's not about the hearts we break, it's about the love we've given and the connections we've had, even when they remind us of what we've lost. My journey continues, and while the weight of grief never truly disappears, it has shaped me, making me more compassionate and empathetic. Life, an unpredictable and beautiful mess, brings us together, even as it tears us apart. And with every child's laughter I hear, I remember that the journey of healing is about cherishing those memories, carrying the pieces forward, and giving love as fiercely as we feel loss. Every day, I hold on to the hope that in the end, it is this love that helps us heal. Update: a few weeks after Ethan's passing, as I sat in the break room with my colleagues, a familiar face walked in. It was Ethan's mother, a visit I had not anticipated. She sparked a conversation that felt like a warm embrace, recounting stories of Ethan's joy, his love for life, and how he often spoke of our adventures and dreams. She reached out, holding my hand, tears glistening in her eyes, and said, "Thank you for seeing him, for sharing his laughter and reminding us all of the beauty in even the hardest days." In that moment, I understood, we were continuing the journey together, carrying pieces of love that transcended loss, forming a bond that would forever connect us. As we sat together in that small, dimly lit room, I could feel the weight of her gratitude pressing down on me, heavy yet sweet, like the promise of rain after a long drought. Ethan's mother, with her fragile smile, drew me back into the memories of all the times we shared with her son, his insatiable giggles echoing in the sterile air of the clinic, his mischievous antics that wove laughter into the fabric of our often somber surroundings. Each story she shared wrapped around me like a soft blanket, warming me against the chill of grief that I sometimes felt creeping at the edges of my heart. I realized then that healing isn't something we do alone, it's a community effort built on shared love and poignant moments. We spoke for hours, the outside world fading into the background as we became a safe haven for each other. She recounted the day Ethan saw the ocean for the first time, how wide his eyes grew, and how he squealed with delight as the waves danced around his tiny feet. With each story, I could see the flicker of life return to her eyes, a reminder that even in our most profound sorrow, the essence of our loved ones remains forever illuminated in the joy they imparted. In that shared vulnerability, we formed an unspoken pact, a promise to honor Ethan not just in our memory but by living fully, by embracing the joy and laughter that he once brought into our lives. As our hands remained clasped, I could feel the pulse of our connection, a lifeline forged through loss and laughter, through heartbreak and hope. As the shadows lengthened in the room and the soft glow of evening crept through the window, I sensed that this was more than just a visit, it was a turning point. We could grow together in our grief, transforming it into something beautiful and nurturing rather than allowing it to cut us off from joy. I began to contemplate ways I could honor Ethan's legacy, perhaps by organizing a small gathering for families within the hospital, creating an evening of joy where laughter could fill the air the way he once had, a butterfly flitting from one bloom to another, leaving behind traces of wonder. Leaving that day, I felt lighter, as if I had shed a layer of sorrow and found room for new beginnings. I held on to our radiant conversation, replaying her words in my mind. Even in sadness, we could stir the depths of joy. Love was not merely a memory, it was a force vibrant and alive. Days turned into weeks, and with each new sunrise, I found renewed inspiration. Within myself and my work, I pored over every detail of the event I was planning, wanting it to reflect Ethan's essence, a blend of creativity, imagination, and the exuberant spirit he had embodied. Finally, the night arrived, and the community gathered under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, laughter melding with the soft sounds of night. I stood at the front, heart racing as familiar faces mingled, their smiles interspersed with bittersweet reminders of what we had lost. We filled the space with colors, balloons, painted rocks, and banners that announced the joy of living and loving deeply, something that Ethan had taught us with every smile he shared. I watched as families interacted, each tender moment a testament to connections being forged anew, and it felt as if Ethan was right there with us, his laughter curling around us like a tender embrace. That evening was transformative. It not only stood as a monument to Ethan's joy but also as an invocation of our own healing paths. As I looked around at the smiling faces, I realized how far we had all come, united through both our grief and joy. I could hear echoes of laughter that were reminiscent of the sweet sounds he once made, and it filled my heart to know we were all learning to carry those pieces together, to find joy even amidst shadows. Reflecting back, I understood that every life touched holds the potential to spark connections that ripple far beyond our immediate perceptions of loss. The memory of Ethan no longer felt like a fragile remnant of pain. Instead, it had metamorphosed into a vibrant reminder of the resistance of joy. The journey of healing doesn't always mean mending, but it most certainly means learning to carry the pieces of what was lost with compassion and grace, and for that, I will forever be grateful. Update: a few months later, I received a message from Ethan's mother. She told me that her family started a tradition of celebrating Ethan's favorite things every year, flying kites in the park on his birthday, with laughter resonating through the breeze, reminding them to cherish every fleeting moment of joy life offers. She invited me to join, and I could hardly hold back the tears that welled in my eyes. I realized then that love is never truly lost. It finds new ways to wrap around us, creating connections that bring light even in the darkest of places. I still remember the night I got the call that changed everything. I was sprawled out on my couch, munching on cold pizza and trying to binge watch a series I had been neglecting. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with my brother Alex's name lighting up the screen, and I paused, shoving a slice aside to answer. He sounded frantic. His dog, Max, had swallowed a toy and was in serious trouble. The vet bills were going to be astronomical, and Alex, who always seemed to live paycheck to paycheck, was in panic mode. I could hear Max whimpering faintly in the background, but what struck me most was the desperation in Alex's voice. He said he'd do anything to save him. Then came the awkward but necessary reminder of the $7,000 I had received as a reimbursement for a recent trip, money that I had earmarked for a much-needed down payment on a car. That dream felt so close, and yet here was my brother, my only family, pleading for help. "I don't know what to do, I can't afford this, please, I'll pay you back," he begged, and I could practically hear Max's tiny heart racing in my imagination. I felt torn apart. I pictured myself in Alex's shoes, drowning in worry, and how helpless I'd feel without the means to help Max. But that money wasn't just meant for my car, it represented stability and independence. With my heart heavy, I said, "Okay, I'll help, but you have to promise to pay me back." The relief in his voice was palpable, but it left me with a knot in my stomach because I knew I was setting aside my own needs, yet another instance of playing the role of the responsible sibling. A month later, I received a text that Alex's vet bills had exceeded my original offer. The more I sat with this, the more my anxiety grew. I had scrimped and saved to take that trip and had budgeted every cent meticulously, only to consider forking it over to Alex without any clear path back to my own goals. When I pressed him for repayment guarantees, he just got defensive. "You don't understand, Claire. This is about saving a life." I was a mix of frustration and guilt, feeling like he was weaponizing Max's health against me. It didn't help that Max had surgery, he was doing better, but I was still financially adrift, and my own bills were piling up. I started to withdraw, hesitating to reach out to my brother, fearing he might expect more from me. Our conversations became strained, every message loaded with unspoken tension. I felt like a villain for wanting my financial security but also a fool for not stepping up more. AITA for not just giving this up? I want to support him, but how can I? I contemplated, sitting on the edge of a precursory decision, my emotions tangled up like a knot I couldn't quite untie. Every day felt like a weigh-in, balancing my love for my brother against my needs. I finally reached out, heart pounding, and we talked it out. He reiterated how grateful he was but made me realize he needed to own his responsibilities, too. In that moment of raw honesty, we both recognized that familial bonds shouldn't be measured in money. We found a way forward, adjusting his payments while developing new understandings of our roles. It's been a month since our conversation, and though Alex still hasn't fully paid me back, I can feel the shift in our dynamic. We're more communicative now, working together on building that sibling bond while slowly repairing our financial strains. I'm still working toward my car and letting go of that guilt that weighed so heavy on my shoulders. As for Max, he seems to be thriving, wagging his tail more than ever, and honestly, the sight of him bouncing around has been worth every unspent dollar. Life goes on, and so do we. I never thought that a dog could teach humans so much about resilience and love, but here we are. Sitting in my living room on a rainy Saturday morning, I watch Max sprawled out on the couch, belly up, legs splayed like he owns the place. His existence has brought this unexpected joy into our lives, a bright spot amid the turbulent waters we've been navigating. As I sip my coffee, I think back to where it all started, the phone call from Alex that threw our family finances into disarray. At first, it felt like a betrayal when he asked me for the money I had reimbursed for our trip. 7 grand was no small amount, especially when it had been earmarked for my car payments. But the moment he voiced his concern about Max's health, suddenly I wasn't just considering my expenses, I was wrestling with the moral weight of my decision. Was I being selfish for holding on to what was technically mine, even if it could help save a life? That hum of internal conflict lingered for days. I remember pacing my apartment late at night, phone in hand, my mind racing with thoughts of Alex's mounting vet bills and the reality of Max's situation, a mix of concern for my brother and the loyalty I felt toward my own responsibilities. Our late-night conversations grew more profound, more vulnerable. I started understanding that Alex wasn't just my brother but also a guy who felt trapped, scared, and desperately in love with his dog. It shifted something in our relationship. My decision not to transfer that money immediately felt like an anchor in this new, tumultuous sea we were sailing. Over time, as I slowly began to find my footing again through little jobs and gig opportunities, I'd worked out a plan to address my own financial concerns without abandoning him completely. I agreed to help him with a fraction of the costs because I knew that Max's well-being weighed heavier on his heart than any financial burden I was carrying. Then there was that one Saturday morning after Alex had worked late into the night just to bring in some extra cash. I could see the exhaustion drawn on his face. I made us both a hearty breakfast, scrambled eggs with toast and avocado, and set it on the kitchen table. The smell of the coffee brewing and the sizzle of the eggs seemed to wake him from a stupor, and as he sat down, I could feel the tension easing between us a little more. "You didn't have to do this," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I'm fine managing on my own, you know." "Yeah, but I think we both need this," I replied, feeling the warmth of our moment. That morning felt different. As we shared stories about our childhood, about fights over whether we were going to eat cereal or a sandwich for dinner, that affectionate banter we held so dear, I noticed our walls were coming down. I could see how much he cared about Max, and I was easing into my own role of support rather than a reluctant benefactor. By now, it was clear that our relationship was morphing. Thanks to late-night chats, hearty breakfasts, and those small decisions to be there for each other, I could finally release the tension built up from those days of resentment and guilt. As the weeks rolled on, I found that seeing Max bounce around with energy made the guilt of not having my car more bearable. Each evening, I would join Alex on walks with Max, enjoying the fresh air. We'd talk about silly things, music, movies, and his latest attempts at becoming a TikTok sensation. I never imagined the world of dog stardom could be so competitive, but seeing him get more animated discussing it lifted my spirits. And sure, things aren't perfect yet. There are still disagreements about finances and the lingering edge of unfulfilled expectations regarding repayment, but we're working through it together. It's less of a transaction and more about reconnecting. We're nurturing our connection instead of guarding our pockets. I still want my car, and I still don't have all my ducks in a row financially, but I've come to realize that there's something more valuable in these moments with Alex and Max. Life is messy, and sometimes we end up in these tangled webs, but as I stare at Max now, I recognize that we're all figuring it out in our own time, one paw, $1, and one fragile bond at a time. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the living room where I sat with Alex, both of us fully enveloped in a narrative that was still very much in progress. Max, his soft golden fur catching the light just right, lay sprawled on the floor, blissfully unaware of the intricacies of human transactions and expectations. The vigor with which he played with his squeaky toy felt like an innocently perfect metaphor for the simplicity we all sometimes overlook. It was moments like this that made me realize how worth it was to prioritize relationships over finances, no matter how tempting it was to cling to the cold, hard numbers that dictated our realities. I glanced at Alex, who was focused on his phone, probably debating whether to text the veterinary clinic about Max's follow-up appointment. There was a new tenderness to our interactions. The shadows of previous conversations no longer seemed to linger like an unwelcome cloud above us. Instead, they were softer now, like hints of rain, bringing life to dry earth. "Hey," I said, breaking through his concentration. "You know I'm proud of you, right? For making decisions that are best for Max." He looked up, surprise flickering across his face momentarily before his features settled into an almost shy smile. "Yeah? Thanks," he replied, rubbing the back of his neck, a young habit he hadn't outgrown. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just flailing around," I chuckled, shaking my head. "We all are. And flailing is totally okay. Just means we're trying." The energy in the room shifted again, a sort of understanding settling in the space around us. It was a reminder of our childhood days, silly but honest adventures where flailing often resulted in laughter. With each conversation, we shared not only the events of our days but also our vulnerabilities, our doubts. I found solace in sharing my worries about my finances. Sometimes I would even admit my lingering desires for that car while Alex voiced his fears about the vet bills piling up and how they would affect his already meager budget. Yet, there we were, two adults learning that money isn't the core of our bond but merely a side note. As if on cue, Max leapt up, capturing our attention as he chased his toy across the room, skidding slightly as he turned a corner too quickly. "Super dog," I shouted playfully and tossed his ball toward the kitchen. His excitement was infectious, and for a few moments, we watched him, both of us chuckling at the silliness of it all. It wasn't lost on me how Max had somehow tethered us back together in a way that money never could. He was family, and sustaining him meant nourishing our relationship too. There was still a long road ahead. I could feel the weight of unfulfilled promises and unpaid bills lingering, but each day of shared responsibilities felt like a little victory. I had let go of the need to keep precise accounts between us. Our relationship was worth more than dollar signs. Instead, I focused on being there when Alex called for moral support and being flexible when it came to managing my own financial expectations. Weeks went by and the dynamic continued to shift from necessity to genuine connection. Sometimes, while Alex was working late or volunteering with Max at the local shelter, I'd steal moments for myself, negotiating my own budgets, trying to find a way to carve out a new sense of financial independence. Instead of pressuring myself to rebalance the scales, I began to find joy in little luxuries, a fancy coffee after a long day or a new book to immerse myself in. It wasn't about recklessness but rather a practice in nurturing my own happiness alongside my obligations to my brother and his dog. One evening, sprawled comfortably on the couch, Alex and I watched an old movie together, the kind that stretched between dramas and comedies, filled with awkward pauses and inopportune moments. Max was nestled between us, snoring softly as we munched on popcorn. I felt a serene sense of contentment washing over me. It struck me that the burdens I thought were too heavy to carry were lightened even just by sharing the journey with someone else. I didn't know if I would ever get that car, and honestly, it started to feel relatively trivial against the backdrop of healing that was happening. Each time I saw Max bounded around, or caught a glimpse of Alex's genuine laughter, I recognized that the recalibration of our lives didn't need to revolve around a reimbursement of $7,000 after all. As the credits rolled and the room was filled with warmth from the setting sun, I smiled, grateful for both the challenges and the small victories that continually reshaped my understanding of family and commitment. Whatever came next, be it car ownership or new financial goals, would ultimately be secondary to the connections made, patched up, and reinforced through this journey of shared learning, love, and, of course, one wagging tail at a time. I always thought family meant sticking together no matter what, but here I was, standing on the brink of not attending my sister's wedding, and it felt like a betrayal. My sister, Alyssa, had been planning her big day for over a year, and I could see how excited she was about every little detail. But as the date drew nearer, I learned the venue wasn't accessible. For someone who's been in a wheelchair since a car accident a decade ago, it was more than just a minor inconvenience, it felt like a punch to the gut. I vividly remember sitting in my living room, laptop on my lap, scrolling through pictures of the beautiful estate Alyssa had chosen with its sweeping staircases and narrow doorways. I couldn't help but wonder if she had ever envisioned a day when her older brother would be trapped outside, missing the one moment I knew she'd dreamed about since she could barely walk. I tried to shake off the knot tightening in my stomach, convincing myself I could find a way around it. Maybe I could watch the ceremony on video or have someone FaceTime me from the venue. But what kind of brother would I be if I chose to observe from a distance? That thought gnawed at me, pulling at the very fabric of my identity. I wrestled with an internal conflict, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Anger towards my sister for not ensuring the venue was accessible, guilt for even considering not going, and bitterness towards my circumstances, as if they were dragging me into a corner away from being part of the family. I finally picked up my phone, my heart racing as I dialed her number. When she answered, there was a brightness in her voice that made my heart ache. "I can't wait for you to see everything, it's going to be perfect," she exclaimed, and I could almost picture her twirling around in excitement. "About that," I stumbled, my voice thick, and I felt a wave of nausea crash over me as I explained the accessibility issues. There was a loaded silence on the other end before Alyssa's tone shifted. I didn't think to check. "I'm so sorry, I thought it would work," she said, and I could tell she was genuinely upset. I didn't want her day ruined or for her to feel guilty when she shouldn't. "You should still go," I found myself insisting, my throat tight. I just don't know if I can be there and not actually be there, you know? I hung up feeling like I just dropped an emotional bomb. The days ticked by, and the wedding loomed like a shadow over me. I could picture her in her stunning gown, surrounded by smiling friends and family, while I would be left questioning my place in it all. A week before the wedding, Alyssa called again, her voice more subdued. Is there any way you can come? I've been looking into portable ramps and maybe we can figure this out. As sweet as her intentions were, the thought of making her scramble at the last minute felt like yet another weight on her shoulders. You know what? I think it's okay if you and I just FaceTime, I suggested weakly, my heart breaking at disconnecting us in such a pivotal moment. I love you, Alyssa, but I don't want to be a distraction. The day of the wedding, I dressed up and sat in front of my laptop, fighting back tears as the first chords of the wedding march filled my living room. I could almost feel the warmth of the sun streaming through the trees at the venue and hear the cheers of family members rejoicing. Alyssa looked beautiful, glowing in her gown, but as I raised my hand to wave hello, my heart felt heavier than it ever had. After the ceremony, as I watched my sister laugh and dance, a small part of me felt anger bubbling to the surface, anger at the world for shutting me out, and a bigger part, a sort of bittersweet acceptance, knowing that this was my reality. I realized that distancing myself from the family wasn't the answer, no matter how much it stung. Sure, Alyssa hadn't thought through the accessibility, but she loved me, and that love didn't hinge on the staircases I couldn't climb. As I shut my laptop after the final toast, I felt a mixture of regret and relief. I hadn't been there in person, but in some way, our bond remained intact. Months later, she and I would go to lunch, and in between bites of sweet potato fries, she slipped a note across the table, an invitation to help choose the venue for her renewal of vows in a few years. I promise it'll be accessible, this time, she winked. And just like that, through all the twists and turns, I found a glimmer of hope that we could advance together, step by step, no matter the distance life put between us. As I sat across from her, the smell of garlic aioli mingling with the warm spring air, I realized how much I had missed moments like this, just the two of us laughing and reminiscing. The sweet potato fries felt like a bridge over the gap that had grown during our years of silence. My sister had always been the one with boundless energy, pulling me along on adventures I never asked for but ended up loving. I remembered all the times I had wheeled alongside her through bustling city streets and quiet parks, her laughter echoing in my ears while my wheelchair was simply a part of the scenery. But then came the wedding, a day that should have been filled with joy, turned into a painful reminder of our differences and the rift that widened with each turn of the planning while she embarked upon without considering my needs. It hadn't been just a physical divide, it had felt like an emotional chasm, one that I feared might never be bridged. When she slipped that note across the table, my heart did a little skip, but I also felt the weight of uncertainty. Could we truly move forward? I stared at the invitation, the elegant script of her handwriting unspooling memories of our childhood, twilight backyard adventures, late-night conversations, and the little secrets we whispered as we tucked ourselves into bed, feeling invincible. I chuckled softly at the graphics she'd sketched. In the margins, twisting shapes of flowers and stars that looked more like a childhood doodle than a wedding concept. So where do we start? I finally asked, my voice betraying the mix of excitement and caution churning inside me. She squeezed her brown eyes in that way she did when she was gleeful, a sign that we were on the same page again. How about the beach? I've always wanted to say I do with the waves crashing behind me. As the conversation flowed, the ideas poured out like a refreshing tide, bringing warmth and a sense of renewal I hadn't realized I was longing for. We drew sketches on napkins, imagined colors that would drip down the canvas of our memories. The sun illuminated our laughter, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I could feel the spark of our bond rekindling. Yet, the doubt lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet reminder that we still had hurdles to overcome. Months passed as we wove through planning meetings, and as my sister pursued her dream, I cheered her on, yet my heart was a mixture of elation and lingering anxiety. How would she react when the spotlight shifted to the accessibility concerns again? Would we be able to mesh our visions, the grandeur of her dream wedding with the stark reality of my needs? I can't help but think of how the last few years had unfolded. The push and pull of our lives seemed like an intricate dance, one where we stepped in and out of sync. Then, the day finally arrived for the venue tour, and the stakes felt immeasurable. With each step closer to the location, my heart raced, anticipation wrapping around me like a comforter. This was a chance for us, not just for her, but for us as sisters. We pulled up to the beach venue, the soft sound of waves greeting us. She hopped out excitedly, taking in the scenery, and my heart tightened with a mixture of hope and dread. "What do you think?" she called back, her voice cutting through the salty breeze. I looked at the row of steps leading to the beautiful sandy stretch, and a lump formed in my throat. "It has to be accessible," I replied, my voice shaky as I formulated the words. There was a pause, then she turned back, her expression transforming from joy to concern. The realization hung between us, a flimsy thread ready to snap. "I didn't even think about that," she admitted softly. I felt a wave of frustration crash over me, but there was something in the way she looked at me, regret mixed with determination. "Let's make sure that it is," I said, grounding her back into the conversation. "What matters is that we celebrate your love, and no one should have to limit themselves based on perceived barriers." As we spent the afternoon discussing every detail from ramps to seating arrangements, I could feel that earlier tension melting away. She listened, genuinely wanting my input, and by the end of it, there was a sense of unity, a reaffirmation that we were partners in this journey. And as I wheeled down the ramp they reluctantly agreed to install, gentle sunlight spilling over us, I couldn't help but feel that we were building something reliable. A relationship that allowed for both of our anxieties and ambitions, stretching into the future like the horizon before us. We were stumbling into a new chapter, and in that moment, every step she took toward inclusivity felt as powerful as the waves crashing behind us, paving the way for us to finally come together. As we rolled away from the fluttering banners and the sound of laughter behind us, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the end of one intense chapter and the hopeful beginning of another. The sun cast a golden glow on the pavement, and every part of me ached to believe that we had finally moved past the doubts and strange tensions that had once defined our relationship. Our lunch promise, nestled between bites of sweet potato fries, felt like a pact, a blend of growth and understanding that I hadn't been sure we'd ever reach. We spent those early days after the wedding navigating each other's perspectives, developing a rhythm that suited both of us. Sarah, ever the planner, wanted to ensure that what had once felt limiting now blossomed into opportunities. I'd go through design magazines stacked on her coffee table, filling the spaces with doodles of accessible moments, visualizations of love and laughter shared across barrier-free tables. Choosing hues and fabrics that spoke to our personalities became a habit we cherished. I'd watch her eyes light up whenever she pitched new ideas, and each time my heart swelled more than the last. One evening, while we sat on her porch adorned with string lights, I shared my fears about everything that had transpired, the doubts that still occasionally crept into my knotted stomach. "What if this is just a moment?" I asked, nervousness inching into my voice. "What if we fall back into old patterns?" She laid her hand across mine, and warmth surged through me as she searched my eyes. "It's just the beginning. We're wiser now, right? We won't ignore our differences, we'll embrace them." It struck me how easily she spun my concerns into threads of commitment, weaving our different experiences into something sturdy. Months rolled on, and those gatherings became pivotal. Each event we attended, every meeting with friends, felt like practice. I learned where the gaps in conversations widened and where certain remarks stuck, and Sarah mirrored my growth with palpable enthusiasm. It was strangely exhilarating, a slow dance of vulnerability and strength. We'd share a laugh or a sidelong glance while standing in a circle of friends, our unspoken connection creating everything from an inside joke to the safety of conversation. After a year of navigating through life together, Sarah proposed we host a weekend retreat for family and friends, another venue on the horizon. This time, she meticulously scouted accessible cabins in the hills, poring over pictures and reviews. I argued that they felt too rustic, but she shrugged it off with that charm I'd come to adore. "It's about creating memories, not fitting a mold. We can have fun anywhere." As the retreat weekend approached, I felt those familiar jitters rise. What if things unraveled? What if the old resentments resurfaced? But as friends streamed into the cozy cabin and laughter overshadowed my worries, I felt the sweetness of our hard work settle around us like a hug. Sarah didn't flinch when someone knocked their drink, spilling it across the floor. She smiled, pulled me closer, and called for towels. We adapt. In those little moments, I recognized just how much we had evolved, no longer sidestepping anything difficult. We faced it head on, laughing about mishaps, sharing stories late into the night. As everyone gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing ghost stories, I leaned back, soothed by the crackling flames. The weathered cabin surrounded us felt strong, just like our bond. There was something beautifully imperfect about building our new reality together, one where glances spoke volumes and where every shared experience was a step forward, however small. I could feel the roots of our relationship deepening, intertwining, much like the intertwining branches of the trees around us, and with it came a promise that neither of us would ever stop trying to understand. When Sarah caught my eye and raised her marshmallow-coated stick, I realized that this was more than a moment, it was a commitment, a radiant journey forged through respect and love. It wasn't just about getting things right, it was about creating the space to be wrong, to grow, and together, soar against any odds. I squeezed her hand, my heart whispering words of gratitude, knowing that our story was still unfolding beautifully, in ways neither of us could predict. I have this recurring dream, the kind that stays with you long after you wake up, lingering at the edges of your consciousness like a familiar fog. In it, I'm back in my small apartment, the walls adorned with mismatched memorabilia from my childhood, and the glow of the television casts soft shadows across the clutter. I'd curled up on the couch, a spirited mixture of pillows and warm blankets, with the familiar theme song of my absolute comfort show echoing in my ears. If there's anything uniting my college friends and me over the years, it's the series we could watch a million times and never tire of, That Cozy Life. It's a quirky sitcom about a group of friends maneuvering through life's ups and downs, with quirky plots that always ended in heartwarming moments and the kind of humor that felt like a hug. One evening, while taking a break from my work, I decided to indulge in a binge-watch session. I reached the episode where one of the characters, Elizabeth, confronts her insecurities when her childhood friend returns to town with a life that seems so picture-perfect. As the weight of her feelings washed over her, I felt a pang of recognition ripple through me. It was subtle yet profound, an uninvited reminder of the mounting pressure I felt about my own life choices. You see, I graduated with a degree in literature a year prior, but while my friends soared into burgeoning careers, I found myself working part-time at a local bookstore, surrounded by the musty scent of old pages while my dreams remained wedged between the spines of books I longed to write. I began to question everything, feeling much like my on-screen counterpart caught in a storm of self-doubt, waiting for that breakthrough moment. It was during this time that I reconnected with Mia, my childhood best friend who had left our sleepy town to conquer the big city. In a flurry of excited messages, we agreed to meet up, and I desperately hoped she would bring with her the kind of ambition that once inspired me. When we finally met, we sat in our favorite cafe, the smell of fresh coffee enveloping us as we reminisced about those blissful days of youth that seemed so simplistic in retrospect. Yet as she spoke about her fast-paced life filled with exciting opportunities and endless networking, I could feel my own insecurities rising like a tide. Her sizable success felt intimidating, and my aspirations felt small and silly, as if I'd pitifully missed the memo on how to transform dreams into reality. The hours melted away, but my feelings of inadequacy only deepened. It was then that the memory of That Cozy Life flickered back into my mind, specifically its ability to weave lessons into its light-hearted fabric. I could almost hear Elizabeth's voice saying that success wasn't just a straight path but a winding road filled with bumps and detours, better shared with friends who understood your journey. Finding comfort in this thought, I invited Mia to watch an episode with me, hoping it would create a moment of connection, even in our divergent paths. Surprisingly, she agreed. We laughed until our sides hurt while watching Elizabeth's comedic misadventures and heart-forward journey. When the finale credits rolled, I shared with Mia how the show had always been my safe haven, a means to escape whenever I felt overwhelmed by the real world. In return, she opened up about her struggles with feeling lonely despite her successes, revealing that behind the glimmering facade, she often craved the depth of true connection, something our bond once provided effortlessly. It felt liberating, sharing our vulnerabilities, almost like we were both characters in an episode, two old friends who wandered off script only to find their way back together. By the dusk of that evening, the weight of the world felt lighter, the connection we re-established was profound yet simple. Little did I know that this reconciliation would serve as the catalyst for my journey toward embracing my dreams without the harsh lens of comparison. The days turned into weeks as I found solace in rewatching my beloved series whenever I felt the pressures of adult life creeping up again, allowing those comforting episodes to remind me of the importance of my own narrative. As the months rolled by, I slowly began to pen my own stories, starting with daily snippets inspired by moments observed at the bookstore, drawings from our cafe escapades, and the laughter shared in those newly forged memories. Just the other night, I received a message from Mia that made my heart flutter. She relayed how she'd been watching That Cozy Life too, and found every episode echoing her doubts and aspirations, much like mine. With a burst of excitement and courage, I told her about my new writing project and asked if she'd consider being a beta reader. With her enthusiastic response, I realized the comfort show that warmed our hearts had woven its lessons tightly into our lives, allowing us to share paths filled with uncertainty but also ignited by mutual support and understanding. Life may not be a neatly wrapped sitcom, but as we both learned, it can be just as beautiful to find warmth in familiar ties. I figured sharing my journey on a Reddit thread could lead to further connections and reflections, so I posted under Confessions, hoping to find others who felt similarly. The supportive feedback rolled in, weaving a new network of friendships across the digital expanse. The comfort show had not only offered me solace but introduced me to a community that mirrored the support I truly needed. In retrospect, I realized that while we may never achieve the perfection portrayed on screen, embracing our flawed but vibrant stories transforms mere comfort into genuine courage. The cozy moments tend to hold the most strength, don't they? After all, life is a series of episodes, each rich in its small imperfections and lessons, echoing through laughter and connection. What more could one ask for in the grand script of our lives? As I settled back into my usual routine, I found myself reflecting on the warmth the show had brought into my life, a warmth that seemed to resonate long after the closing credits rolled. I remember binge-watching the series late at night, the glow from the screen wrapping around me like an old, comforting blanket. But it wasn't just the storyline that captivated me, it was the profound sense of understanding I felt from the characters who faced their own struggles, triumphs, and moments of vulnerability. They became friends I never met, existing in a world where flaws were celebrated rather than hidden. Each time I started another rewatch, the familiar dialogue and laughter flowed through my apartment as if it had seeped into every corner, transforming my space into a sanctuary away from the chaos outside. I began sharing my experience with this series on an online forum, weaving together the intricate details of my own life with those of the characters. I reminisced about how the protagonist, with their struggles to find balance between work and relationships, echoed my own internal battles. When I pressed send on my post, I felt a sense of dread, waiting for either silence or criticism, but instead, my inbox flooded with sympathetic messages and stories from others who felt the same. Each interaction became a moment of connection, reminding me that we are all spinning in our own orbits yet inevitably drawn to one another, like planets in a grand cosmic dance. But it was during one late-night reply to a fellow user, their story similar to mine, their struggles palpable, that a twist emerged. They shared how this comfort show had inadvertently helped them cope with their own mental health issues, and it struck a chord in me. I thought of the nights I had sat paralyzed by anxiety, the series lightening my heavy heart, and suddenly felt compelled to give back in some small way. I began organizing virtual watch parties, inviting all those who had reached out, creating a space where we could engage over our shared love for the show. The first gathering felt electric. I could almost hear the pulse of the collective as laughter erupted with every punchline and nostalgic moment. We traveled through our favorite episodes together, voices overlapping in a joyful cacophony of commentary, and in those moments, something remarkable happened. I felt a shift. The heaviness that had lingered in my chest for months began to slip away, replaced by the buoyancy of new friendships forged in the glow of our beloved series. Each gathering deepened our connections, unraveling layers of vulnerability, humor, and warmth, and we soon found ourselves discussing everything from life dreams to fears, so intimate and real it felt surreal. But as the weeks passed and winter settled in outside my window, I noticed one of the participants, Jamie, grew quiet. Their laughter had once been infectious, but during our last meeting, it felt distant, as if a shadow had fallen over their spirit. Concerned, I reached out privately, checking in and sharing my worry. It wasn't long before Jamie replied, spilling their heart out in a series of messages. They spoke of feeling lost, adrift in a world that seemed increasingly isolating, weighed down by expectations, and how the solace they found in our gatherings had begun to feel like a highlight against the drudgeries of life. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just the spectator of my show anymore, I was an active participant in someone else's story. I suggested we have a one-on-one call where we could talk openly, just the two of us. That night, as we spoke, a vulnerability emerged, raw and beautiful. Jamie shared their dreams of pursuing art, their struggles with rejection, and their longing for connection. I listened intently, offering encouragement and sharing my own fears of inadequacy, and as the conversation flowed, it felt like we were crafting our own narrative, one of resilience and hope. Days turned into weeks, and Jamie and I became inseparable during our virtual meetups. With each discussion, we stretched out our dreams and uncertainties like threads, weaving them into something new and vibrant. Inspired by our dynamic, we decided to host a live episode commentary on our favorite parts, creating a new series of posts for those in the community to join us. It was a success. The chatrooms lit up with excitement. The joy felt like fireworks bursting across a darkened sky. In the end, Jamie and I both realized something profound, that our comfort show, while cherished, was never truly the star of the universe. It was the friendships born from it that shone the brightest. Reflecting on this journey, I smiled, knowing that sometimes the most transformative moments come not from the escapism of a favorite episode, but from the connections we foster while embracing our imperfections with courage. Life, after all, had become its own blend of sitcom unpredictability and heartfelt emotional depth, and I was more than ready for the next season to begin. Even amid the uncertainty, I knew, as the credits rolled on this chapter of our story, there was always room for another laugh, another episode, and another friend. I could hardly wait to see what came next, ready to watch the unfolding tapestry of our lives together, the comfort show continuing to inspire us in ways we were only just beginning to understand. In the days that followed, the haze of uncertainty began to lift. I found myself immersed in the online community crafted around our beloved comfort show. Late-night discussions bubbled with animated spontaneity and earnest reflections, while the threads of personal anecdotes intertwined with favorite scenes and shared quotes, forming a tapestry of camaraderie both sweet and reassuring. It was a safe haven. During one particularly quiet evening, I curled up on my couch wearing my favorite oversized sweatshirt, the glow of my laptop illuminating my excitedly furrowed brows. I opened a thread titled Life Lessons from My Comfort Show, and the posts poured in, mirroring our myriad experiences through our shared lens. I read about someone who had lost their job but found the courage to chase their dream of starting a bakery, channeling the spirit of the quirky character we all loved who had redefined failure into a zesty journey of personal reinvention. I smiled at the words of another, who had battled anxiety by replicating the show's unpredictable bravery through small, conscious steps in their daily life. It was like witnessing a series of life scripts intertwining with our favorite sitcom moments, each anecdote brimming with vulnerability and hope. As I watched the clock slide past midnight, a sense of anticipation electrified the air, urging me to take the plunge. A post began forming in my mind, a confession of sorts, combining my personal struggles and an honest tribute to the influence the show had had on my life. With deliberate movements, I started typing. I wrote about how comforting it was to have my own version of that friend from the show who nudged me to embrace spontaneity, urging me to venture out into life rather than waiting for it to come to me. I unconsciously penned down how the catchphrases hovering in our lexicon had shifted from being mere jokes to becoming mantras I whispered to myself during panic-stricken moments. Each sentence flowed easily, my fears spilling out in delicate bursts of honesty. The screen glowed brightly as I finally typed, "In a world painted with anxiety and uncertainties, I find solace in our shared laughter, the connection through flawed characters who echo my own story. Sometimes, I dare to hope I can embody their courage, even if just a little." Once posted, I didn't expect much, anticipating the regular ebb and flow of online life. Yet, within hours, my notifications began to light up like a festival of digital camaraderie. People were sharing their own reflections, building this comforting bridge between their narratives and mine. I found sort of a strange magic in the shared vulnerabilities, the strengths and weaknesses in our piece of the comfort show's vast landscape. Every reply added a new glimmer of hope, a ripple of joy punctuated with laughter. One response, in particular, caught my eye, a message from someone named Jamie, who relayed how they had started their own podcast to discuss similar themes, referencing an episode that mirrored my confession. They wrote, "Let's collaborate. It feels like our stories could guide one another." I realized then that sometimes, behind a computer screen, extraordinary connections form from the simplest of words. As weeks turned into months, Jamie and I began our collaboration, diving deep into the themes interwoven in our lives and our comfort show. We created a small but passionate audience who resonated with our stories of awkwardness, courage, love, and friendship. The podcast blossomed, allowing both of us to explore our thoughts and feelings publicly yet intimately, as if we were peeling back the layers of vulnerability together, like two characters in our very own heartwarming episode. With each new recording session, I could feel my initial hesitations melt away, replaced by an eagerness to share my voice, to really continue unearthing our collective humanity. I often reflected on this new dynamic, how our lives, much like our comfort show, contained humor and depth, a balance that felt both comforting and exhilarating to explore. Every new guest we interviewed infused our conversations with fresh perspectives, spiraling us into meaningful discussions that bubbled with joy and authenticity. But more importantly, they served as gentle reminders of the quirks that make our stories uniquely ours. And then there came a day unlike any other, where our podcast reached a significant milestone, our 100th episode. It felt surreal, almost unreal, celebrating an anniversary where each part of our journey was woven through the echoes of laughter, inspiration, and healing. That night, as Jamie and I recorded, there was an electricity in the air, a blend of nervous energy and vibrant hope. I spoke a little deeper that time, relaying to our listeners how we began this journey amid uncertainties and doubts, drawing strength from the comfort show that had first inspired me to be braver than I felt. Sitting in that small recording room, surrounded by all the memories we had accumulated thus far, moments where we forged our friendship, advocated for one another, and crafted honest discussions that opened our hearts, I knew this was more than just a podcast. It was a living, breathing testament to the connections we forge when we step into the light of vulnerability. As I signed off that night, a comforting thought echoed in my mind: no matter what the next season holds, I have found my rhythm in this episodic journey called life, hand in hand with newfound friends echoing the lessons of our beloved characters. I drifted to sleep that night filled with a warm sense of purpose, ready for whatever came next, ready to embrace it all without fear, knowing that each chapter was merely a beautiful interplay of shared experiences and laughter, another episode in the vast melodrama of our imperfect existence. And this was simply the beginning. There's a certain thrill that comes from the idea of having a carefree night in a wildly adventurous setting, free from the judgments of the everyday world, and I had always fantasized about what it would be like to be caught in a whirlwind romance with a stranger in an exotic locale. That thought lingered in the back of my mind for years, stoked by the countless movies I consumed and the endless stories floating through my social circles. But when I finally found the courage to act on one of my fantasies, I discovered the harsh realities lurking just beneath the surface. It all started when I moved to a new city after college, where everything felt fresh and full of promise. I had just landed a new job that required frequent travel, mostly to glamorous destinations, and one night in Barcelona, after a long day of meetings, I decided to embrace the moment. The warm night air was alive with music and laughter, and I was drawn into a crowded bar pulsating with energy. There, I met him, a charismatic artist with a mischievous glint in his eye and an accent that made my knees weak. He was everything my fantasies had promised: charming, spontaneous, and utterly intoxicating. We danced under the low lights, sharing stories that wove our lives together while the world faded around us. I felt alive for the first time in ages, intoxicated not just by the sangria but by the possibility that I was shedding my mundane reality for something vibrant and exhilarating. As the night deepened, he leaned in closer, whispering promises of adventure and intimacy. I could feel the tension sparking between us, a magnetic pull that made my heart race. Finally, in a haze of desire, we left the bar together, stumbling through dimly lit streets towards the nearest hotel, our laughter echoing off the cobblestones. But as the dawn broke over the city, the fantasy began to unravel. The morning light highlighted the disarray of my choice, and the artist wasn't the smooth romantic I'd pictured. His carefree facade slipped as he started talking about his commitments, his art, and his struggles with mental health. I felt the heavy weight of reality settle over us like a thick fog. Instead of a wild escape, I found myself in a deep discussion that made me acutely aware of the fragility of our encounter. I wanted to run, but there was compassion bubbling within me, urging me to listen and be present, and I struggled with the genuine connection contrasting starkly with the idealized moment I'd envisioned. I felt a rush of panic as I realized that this whirlwind had become a wave threatening to drown me. I was falling for the man behind the fantasy, not just the figure in my dreams, and as we talked, I was faced with the choice of whether to embrace this new reality or cling to the illusion of a carefree evening. Ultimately, I chose connection over escapism. We shared our fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities, and while we parted ways at noon, exchanging hesitant smiles and promises to keep in touch, I was left contemplating the nature of my fantasy and the truth we often overlook. Reflecting on that night, I realized that sometimes fantasies are not merely about pleasure or thrill, they can reveal deeper truths about ourselves, our yearnings for connection, understanding, and shared experience. I returned home feeling both liberated and unsettled, admiring how life rarely unfolds according to our plans. I don't think I'll ever forget him or the raw authenticity of our meeting. A few months later, I received a message from him, a simple "How are you?" followed by a photo of a new painting he'd created, something he claimed was inspired by our conversation. I smiled, knowing that the reality was so much richer than the fantasy, and wondered how many others were out there, living in the shadows of their own dreams. As I reflected on that night, I felt a sense of warmth, realizing that it wasn't a nightmare but a beautiful awakening, one that taught me to cherish the imperfections that make life so compelling. The days turned into weeks, and our exchanges evolved into something more profound. Each message from him felt like a gentle ripple in the still waters of my life, nudging me awake from the humdrum routine I had settled into. We shared fragments of our worlds, documenting every laugh, every desire, and every brush of vulnerability that came alive in our conversations. I began to look forward to our nightly chats, my heart dancing at the thought of unveiling the layers of his mind, and I started weaving him into my dreams. The reality was intoxicating, contrasting sharply with the fantasies I had once indulged in, where everything was steamy and perfect, a performance crafted to delight. This was different, it was raw and authentic, filled with the potential for connection and depth rather than mere physical encounters. There was a kind of magic in the imperfections that crept into our exchanges, like when I stumbled over my words, or he shared a painting that seemed incomplete, an echo of whispers and lines that spoke loudly, but lacked the finish and polish I had envisioned. One evening, during one of our lengthy dialogues, I felt the urge to broach the subject of reality. I wanted to tread carefully, though, knowing how easily dreams can shatter under the weight of expectations. What do you think about exploring our fantasies further? I typed, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send, the question hanging in the digital air between us like a conversation held at a cafe, the scent of coffee and pastries wafting around us. I braced myself. Would he take it as a playful suggestion, or would he see it for what it was, a gentle nudge toward the frayed edges of reality? His reply came quicker than I anticipated, a simple "I've thought about it too. But part of me fears losing what we have." Those words echoed in my mind for days. We were treading on a precipice, hovering between the perfect fantasy we had built and the genuine connection that was blossoming. Part of me wanted to dive headfirst into the chaos of it all, to explore every nuance of our desires, to drunk press those fantasies into reality. But another part of me clung desperately to the warmth and safety of our words. What if the tangibility of our dreams bled the colors out of what was already vivid? The notion of it being a nightmare replayed in my thoughts. It was so easy to dance around the idea of passion when it was wrapped tightly in the cocoon of screens and distance. But what if, when stripped bare, the reality fell flat, an unfinished painting revealed under the hard light of day? Eventually, after scribbling tentative messages in my mind, I took a deep breath and pressed forward. What do you want to see happen? The question was a leap into the unknown, and I felt lighter yet heavier with the weight of it. I wondered if I caught a hint of hesitation in his response, a flicker of uncertainty that made my heart race and pulse thud against my chest. "I want to get to know the real you, beyond the words," he wrote, and I felt an overwhelming warmth spread within me, a craving that stretched beyond mere physicality. Weeks passed. Our dialogues traversed the spectrum of feelings, ranging from innocent musings on artistic inspiration to deep dives into the intricacies of commitment. We lost ourselves in stories of past loves, future dreams, and those midnight confessions that spilled out like secrets beneath the stars. Yet, I sensed a contention hanging over us, a question we were avoiding. I could almost hear it, that whisper of destiny. What would it mean to turn this cartoonish dream of skinny dipping in a warm ocean into a picturesque illusion? And then, one rainy evening in late autumn, a soft invitation came nudging into my inbox. How about meeting in person? The proposition shimmered before me like the glow of an uncertain flame, and I found myself grinning, then quickly frowning. My heart raced, anticipation clawing at my insides. Could I step into the canvas we'd painted together, or was that the moment when everything would dissolve? I could almost see it, the fantasy stretching out like a beautiful, uncharted horizon before me, pulling me in, while simultaneously pushing me away with the heavy weight of reality. Days of contemplation curled around me like smoke, each twist and turn of thought compelling me onward until I had crafted a response that both terrified and thrilled me. Yes. It hung in my mind like a fragile spell, one word laden with promise and dread. We settled on a small art gallery nestled on the quiet outskirts of town, a space drenched in creative energy, where the paintings were lively, and the atmosphere felt ethereal, scattering the lingering doubts like scattered leaves in the wind. The day of our meeting arrived, and 1,000 butterflies danced in my stomach as I entered the gallery, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the smells of rain and warming spices. The initial thrill fluttering in my chest was marred with a thick layer of apprehension. Would we get lost in each other's eyes, or was I stepping into an awkward situation destined to slip back into the shadows? But then I saw him, standing just beneath a sprawling canvas, blue in swirls of deeper hues that echoed the depths of my mind. Our eyes met, and the world faded into a quiet hum. The moment was surreal, bursting with an intensity I had not anticipated. We spent those hours enveloped in conversation, laughter echoing in the small space. I shared thoughts on art, He chuckled at my nervous stumbles, and for every word we exchanged, I felt the invisible thread tying us draw tighter. We painted a new story together, one that was only beginning to emerge from the canvas of our dreams, no longer constrained by the pixels that had connected us. When our hands brushed, I felt warm currents of electricity. It was clear that we were both aware of the tightrope we walked above an abyss of uncertainty, but the magic of the moment kept us tethered. As the evening wound down and twilight seeped into the gallery, we stepped outside, the world outside appearing softer, illuminated under the gentle glow of street lamps. A wave of real, tangible affection washed over me, fueling the moment with a quiet, electrifying promise. There was no fantasy tearing at the seams, no crumbling reality demanding attention. Just two people taking a chance, creating a story marked not by the typical markers of romance or lust, but by the foundations of honesty and friendship. Months later, I lay in bed, replaying the memories of his laughter and our first meaningful kiss, still enveloped in the sweetness of that night. What could have easily devolved into a nightmare instead turned into the core of a thriving journey, one that transformed our shared dreams into a fragile reality, delicate yet beautiful. With every shared moment and vulnerability, we crafted a version of ourselves that was, and always would be, infinitely richer than anything I had found before, reminding me that sometimes it's the unpredictable chaos of life that blooms into the kind of connection we often yearn for in our fantasies. And as I drifted off to sleep, I allowed the bittersweet wonder of it all to embrace me. In the quiet chambers of my mind, shadows of the past faded, replaced with the whispers of dreams yet to be realized, knowing fully that those fantasies, when touched by honesty, could morph into something stunningly, satisfyingly real. That night marked a turning point in my life, each thought spiraling gracefully into the next as I imagined the small changes I could embrace. I often found myself daydreaming about our conversation, the flow of ideas, the laughter interwoven with vulnerability. It became a tapestry of emotions that I would revisit on quiet evenings when the world outside dimmed into a soft glow. I replayed his words, the way he spoke about art and humanity. Folding my own little insecurities into the fabric of our connection, feeling a sense of permission to embrace my chaotic self. Days turned into weeks, and it astonished me how something so serendipitous could linger like the taste of a fine wine, warm and intoxicating. Every text he sent painted another layer in my mind, a canvas I didn't know I had, each exchange revealing the raw essence of two souls entangled in shared dreams. I began to see my life differently. Instead of the linear paths I had always walked, I found myself wandering into serendipitous alleys of adventure and self-discovery. Then, one evening, as rain drizzled softly against my window panes, my phone buzzed with a familiar rhythm. It was him again, this time asking if I'd like to see his latest exhibit, a showcase he had planned for months in a quaint gallery downtown. My heart raced at the thought. Compared to the previous vague illusions of intimacy through our screens, this was a real-world challenge, a shift from fantasy to reality, a chance to interact beyond the confines of our carefully curated words. I hesitated, nervous about stepping out of my comfort zone. What if we encountered the rawness of existence that often lay beyond the realm of our beautiful exchanges? What if it didn't measure up, shattering the soft cocoon we had spun around each other? But the allure of authenticity won the battle within, and I found myself standing before the gallery a few days later, curiosity blooming inside me as I entered the softly lit space. Colors danced on the walls, each painting embodying a story I hadn't lived, but could feel resonating deep within my heart. And there he was, standing proud amidst his canvases, a mix of nervousness and passion radiating from him like a beacon. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, the world around us faded. It was just the two of us, our connection flourishing amidst the strokes of paint and splashes of color. As we navigated through his works, he explained the inspiration behind each piece, his passion electric. I shared my thoughts too, hesitant but emboldened by the beauty around us and the contrast of our conversations that had now grown into something palpable. Yet, amidst the joy of discovery, I noticed a peculiar unease creeping in, a recognition of the thin line we were treading between fantasy and our very real lives. Suddenly, the idealistic images I had conjured up began to waver, revealing the intricacies of human connection that were not always as simple as they appeared in my dreams. It happened during a soft, spontaneous laugh shared over one of his more abstract pieces, which to me seemed chaotic and whimsical, yet to him symbolized the emotional wreckage of lost love and anger. In that moment, the laughter curdled slightly, revealing glimpses of his real-world complexity. As he bore his soul, shadows flickered in his eyes, hints of struggles and disappointments that his art had masked until now. The fantasy I had wrapped around him of the flawless artist who could lead me into a world painted with sunshine, began to reveal a semblance of darkness that mirrored my own. Feeling a rush of vulnerability, I opened up too, speaking of my own tribulations, the tightrope of expectations holding me hostage in my own life. As the evening unfolded, the layers of our conversations peeled back, leaving room for honesty but also a sense of hesitance, an unsteady dance of vulnerability that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Our connection deepened that night but was underscored by the ever-present reminder of our fears and insecurities, that perhaps the very beauty we sought was intertwined with the truths we often shied away from. And finally, as we exited the gallery, the gentle rain had morphed into a light drizzle, cascading down like whispered confessions. Walking side by side without a clear destination, I realized it was okay to embrace the unknown, finding solace in the warmth of his presence. The night felt alive, charged with the potential for shared dreams but also the weight of reality pressing down on us. As we reached a quiet park, the moonlight spilled across the grass, illuminating a space where we could stand still for a moment, allowing the hum of the city to fade into the background. I turned to look at him, and in the silent exchange, I understood. The beauty of our connection was not in the idealized fantasies we had conjured, but in the intricacies, the messiness of our truths intertwined. This wasn't a neatly wrapped story, it was still unfolding, an exquisite blend of highs and lows living in the breath between our words. As I lay in bed that night, the echoes of our conversation lingered, a tapestry woven from threads of joy, fear, longing, and relief. No longer was I drifting off to sleep solely wrapped in thoughts of unrealized fantasies. Instead, I was cradled by the promise of an authentic journey ahead, one where nightmares didn't hold dominion over my dreams. In that acceptance, amidst the cacophony of life's beautiful chaos, I felt free. The stars outside shone brightly, as if nodding along to my revelations, and I surrendered to sleep, secure in the knowledge that every moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of my life, exactly as it was meant to be.